It's now 7 p.m., Tuesday, December 18th, 2018. I'd like to call the Selectmen's meeting to order. Would everyone please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Next would be public forum, limited to 5 minutes per topic. Discussion or comments about town employees or agency members shall be avoided so as not to violate individuals' rights. Anyone here for public forum? Next on the agenda would be the minutes for the Board of Selectmen on December 4th, 2018.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion to accept the minutes from our December 4th meeting as presented.
Second.
Motion's been made and second. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0. Next would be under the agenda would be a public hearing, 61A, Menden Road. Jim? First, or Wendy?
You want to read the?
Yeah.
Yes, Mr. Chair, if you'd allow. As posted in the November 26, 2018 Millbury Sutton Chronicle, notice of public hearing. Notice is hereby given that the Sutton Board of Selectmen will hold a public hearing to discuss the town's options under Mass General Law, Chapter 61A, Section 14, Tuesday, December 18th, 2019, at 7:00 p.m. The meeting will be held in the Sutton Town Hall regarding Chapter 61A property, which is located at 172 Menden Road and further described as Parcel A, Assessors Map 30, Parcel 96. This lot further identified as 80,423 square foot, 423 square feet, approximately, which will be removed from Chapter 61A and sold. This meeting will be held on the third floor of the Sutton Municipal Center, 4 Uxbridge Road, Sutton, Mass. 01590. The public is invited to attend this public hearing.
And I declare the meeting open. Jim?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This one's pretty easy. None of the boards or committees have expressed any interest in this land, so I'm recommending the board pass over this and do not exercise the right of first refusal.
Dave?
No, does anybody want to speak?
Mr. Kowzik, want to come up and say anything?
Well, I guess I'm happy. Now we're gonna have a new person to move in there, be a good person, and the lot is not that easy to get into, so it wouldn't have done the town any good. But I do have some other land. The last meeting we were here with the Walsh property.
Mhm.
You people, somebody made a motion about picking up some of the land for future cemetery use. Now, the property that we sold to the town, I've got adjoining land to it. I got about 4 acres there, and it's nice and level, and if need be, if the town is interested, we'll talk turkey.
Okay.
Because I know the other person was big dollars on what they had in mind, but it never happened. So it's just as well I can save the town some money. Plus, I gotta buy a house lot there myself. I guess that's it.
Thank you.
Dave?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Kowzik, for coming in again. You've been sort of a regular here lately, but of course, there's really not a lot to discuss as far as I can see, so I really have no further comments, so.
Jesse?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, thanks again, Mr. Kowzik, for coming in. And, a regular face is always wonderful to see. Hopefully, you can keep coming back. That would be a good thing. But beyond that, I see no issue. If the town's not interested in exercising its right of first refusal, then I say allow this sale to happen. Thank you.
Wendy?
My only question is just looking at the assessor's map that we have attached to the agenda. I don't see Lot 30. I was just curious where it falls in here. I know you had mentioned, Mr. Kowzik, that there was some issue with potentially accessing it. I'm not really sure where it's located. Is that right? It's Lot 30, do you know?
I'm not sure, all I know is 172 Menden Road. And on one of the survey plans that I have, they listed as lot A, I think.
It's, on this assessor's map, it says 30/96. Maybe further
Yeah.
down.
So 96 is there.
Okay,
Okay.
thank you. I was just curious. That's all, Mr. Chair.
Okay, Jonathan,
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I see no reason for the town to exercise the right of refusal on this.
okay, and I concur with all my colleagues. And we have a motion on the floor?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion to close the public hearing.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0.
Mr. Chairman, I'd also like to make a motion not to exercise the town's option under Massachusetts General Law, Chapter 61A, for the 80,423 plus or minus square feet of the property located at 172 Mendon Road, map 30, parcel 96.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank you, board.
See you next time.
Next on the agenda, we have Whittier Farms, Chain of Lights. Jim?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Wayne Whittier contacted me, requested to be on the Board of Selectmen's agenda. I spoke with you, Mr. Chairman, and you agreed to it. So that's really all we need to do as far as a process. And I guess I'll just turn it over to Wayne. I'm assuming this has to do with the chain of lights from a couple weeks ago.
Wayne, we're all familiar with it. Would you just please state your name and address?
Wayne Whittier, 7 Douglas Pike,
Thank you.
and thank you to the board, Jim, for allowing us to come before you. Your December 4th meeting, we had been contacted the day prior to that about an issue with the Chain of Lights event at Whittier Farms. A couple of people had mentioned that it wasn't necessary for me to be at that meeting, and I wasn't here. I feel like that there was a lot of misinformation shared. There was information that wasn't true. There was information that wasn't fully disclosed. And I'd like to run down a few things in regards to some comments that were made at that meeting. First of all, we were approached by the Chain of Lights Committee, who I understand that some of you have met with since then. Again, I was not included in that meeting. About hosting a beer garden at our farm. We were given 2 names of breweries, local breweries, to contact. We contacted them in person, by phone, email, and what was needed for us to participate in that. Went on for a couple of weeks back and forth when we received notice from a licensed bartending service that we had proposed to hire for the event, that his license would not cover because it was open to the public. But then it came up that samples could be served without a license. That was information that was given to us from one of those companies. We looked into it on our end relatively quickly, but we did look into it. It's not addressed in the town's bylaw. It's not addressed easily through the ABCC's website. It wasn't until afterwards, after being contacted, that we went back and found out that it is addressed deep into the Mass General Law. Samples were served. They were set up to the left of our store on a one-way path into our sample area, which we've done in the past. The samples in the store, all the trash, all the cups were thrown out within that building. We had 2 members of our staff or family that were to watch and make sure nobody exited that building with a cup, and that did not happen. I mentioned it was brought to my attention Monday, and that we were in some kind of violation. It was also brought to my attention through my family members and some other members of the town that there was 4 people employees or appointed officials of the town that passed through our building during that day. Not one of them said anything to our staff or my family that was working that day about, hey, something might not be right. Had that happened, I can assure you that part of that event would have been shut down immediately. We operate a business in town, we have been for a long time. We don't try to take shortcuts. It was alluded to that we were trying to skirt some regulations, and that was not. That being said, for the beer samples, like I said, nobody was out in the yard with it. We thought we were controlling it to the best we could, having no idea that we were in violation of a one-day permit. Some other comments that were made in regard to the food trucks that were at our business. Those food trucks were a method for us to concentrate more solely on the products that we were showcasing in our building instead of us doing lunch. Both companies have ties to our business, have ties to Sutton as a whole. One of them, Captain Martin's, is a product that we sell in the store. The Lions Club was mentioned as if we had kicked them out. The Lions Club was asked in 2008 to start serving lunch at the event at our place. They did so until 2016, when the committee of the Lions Club asked and mutually agreed to move them to Manchog because they're a community-oriented group. They could bring something to the Manchog area that didn't exist to better the chain of lights. Mutual agreement was made, and they went there for 2017 and again this year. My family, mostly my wife, loves Christmas. It's the highlight of our year. It has become one of the busiest times of our year as well. For over 15 years, she coordinated. My family helped. We even employed people to help us with decorating the common and the tree lighting. By doing the trees, moving Santa and Mrs. Claus, some really cold nights that I was in that sleigh with them. Never to get a penny, never to expect a penny in return. It was something we did for the community. When Mary got to a point where she didn't know how she was going to have time enough to coordinate, decorating the common, that task was shifted to the Lions Club, hopefully so that they could make it a fundraiser. And I really, truly hope it has worked out that way. Our company, Whittier Farms, was approached in 1996, right after our store opened, to see if we would participate in the Chain of Lights as a community event. What can we help bring the community together? In '97, we had our first Chain of Lights at Whittier Farms. It became a popular spot. I think it was mentioned, at least it was mentioned to me, that it didn't start out as a family event. It started out as an event to showcase businesses in town. It has evolved, and I'm very happy of how it has evolved. The items that we showcased this year at our farm, samples inside the store, the food trucks outside the store, and being approached by the committee about doing the beer, which inevitably didn't end up as it was planned, it ended up as samples, was in an effort to bring a different demographic group into town into the chain of lights to showcase the businesses, the churches, the schools, every other group that participates. We didn't do this knowing that we were wrong. I'm sorry if we offended somebody, but being offended is a very light word to describe how I felt the night of December 4th at the end of your meeting. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Wayne, thank you for being here. You know, over the last couple of weeks, since that meeting, it's been pretty well known that you were unhappy with our meeting that night, and for you to come out tonight and give us a calm recitation of the way that you see things, I think is helpful and appropriate, and helps to you know, share the spirit of the event, and I think it's good for all of us to just sort of talk it out and have some understanding. You know, so I from my side, you know, I'm always the first one that talks, and I think you heard me react kind of demonstratively. Thank you. And you know, that was an honest reaction from me at this point. I think anybody that's followed this board for a period of time would know that we've worked on alcohol issues pretty significantly. Just for background, when I was new on the board, we had we had somebody before us because there had been a violation, and we didn't have any context in which to sort of handle that, and we developed an alcohol policy here. That policy talks about a process for handling violations when they come up. We worked a lot on compliance issues, and it even got to the point where we had somebody that had a couple of different violations, and according to the kind of the rules that we had set up, we actually had to suspend somebody's license for a day, and it matched, you know, right with the policy that we had created, and so, you know, my perspective on it is that it's an issue that we have taken pretty seriously. We've taken it to heart. And so the reaction you saw from me that night was really just, you know, a feeling that what I consider to be, you know, a pretty serious rule violation had occurred. And you know, irrespective of who that was or where it had occurred, I felt like the board had an obligation to respond to that. You know, one of the questions that I've been asking myself is, but what do you do about that? You know, what do we want to get out of that? And you know, I guess from my perspective, what we got that night, what has been discussed in town to me is that there's been an alcohol violation, and I think people understand that that's not okay. And you know, at the end of the day, that's the response that I want the town to have. I don't really see a need to do anything further. I would say that had you not wanted to come here tonight, that probably this issue would have been done and over with. It wouldn't have. There was no further agenda item for this at our board level. You know, I don't think there was any further punishment that was on the way. But I guess that's the only takeaway that I have. I felt it was important for this board to note what had occurred, because I still feel it's important that people understand that that there are these rules, and that, you know, irrespective of Chain of Lights, any event that goes on during the course of the year, that you need a license to serve alcohol. And you know, at least as I see it, that's the message that's been sent. So it was not intended to call you out in particular, Whittier's Farm out in particular, but it was an issue that we needed to deal with. So that is just where I was coming from that night. That's my perspective.
Jesse?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Wayne, Mary, good evening. Thank you for coming out. I'll be honest, I was a little, we've talked, for full disclosure, and I did mention that the night that I stopped by the farm shortly thereafter, the Tuesday or whatever, and I had a chance to hear your side, and as I told you then, you know, I completely am empathetic. I understand that sometimes finding the right solutions to problems, particularly in the day of the internet age, when you have experts in the field telling you one thing, it's not always easy to determine. As I said to you at the time also, that, again, it's still my feeling, and I think Dave just kind of touched upon that, is that if there was going to be a response from this board that evening, that it would be anything not necessarily aimed at punishing, but again, just trying to have a conversation with the community as a whole. Just trying to not necessarily set the tone, because that sounds negative, but just to kind of clear the air in the sense that there was a violation that occurred, and, you know, moving forward, let's as a community learn from this, because we don't want to have any repeats. Because as I'm sure you feel, and I know I feel, as my colleagues do, you know, not saying that a little sample could cause something, but God forbid if something did. You know, it would just kind of be horrendous. So my perspective is very simple, that, you know, going forward, any issue that involves liquor, you know, any event that wants to bring in any type of liquor, that, you know, I think we are clear in expressing the need to come before us. But as Dave said, you know, in terms of this particular incident, it's, I don't want to say no harm, no foul, but lesson learned in a sense, because ultimately, it's not like you're a liquor store. If you were a liquor store, we could pull your license. We have a clear policy that deals with such violations. It was a one-day event. You were opening your farm to allow these vendors coming in, so it's not like it's even a product that you sell. But so yeah, I apologize. I'm having a hard time with this, because I completely empathize with you, and we've talked about it. And at the very least, I appreciate the fact that you came and you had a chance to say your side. Because as you told me, it's not just your business, it's your family, it's your reputation, and it's everything that you've done for this town. So, you know, I'm not gonna stand on the soapbox anymore. I just wanna leave off with just thank you for coming. I appreciate your words. And thank you, Mary, for coming with them as well. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Wendy?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Again, thank you both for coming. I know it's not easy, but it's necessary. I don't want to repeat everything everyone said. I just think at the end of the day, you know, town employees may not have been sure what was going on that day. Perhaps nobody really was, but I think it's a good learning lesson for us as a board, for businesses in town, for committees in town, that if you're unsure or uncertain, the ABCC does have a hotline you can call to inquire. If, you know, you got bad information from a business that should have known better, then, you know, then certainly that's where the onus lies. But yeah, I do appreciate you coming, and I can tell you as a community member, I really appreciate everything the farm does for Chain of Lights and for other events. And I just look forward to everything sort of healing going forward, and sort of taking it as a learning tool for the community, not for you, but for the community as a whole. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You're welcome. Jonathan?
Mr. Chairman. You know, when this came up last week, and you know, I've been thinking about it for the last, you know, week or so. This was a really hard situation, because it's very especially hard because you're a really respected business in town, and a really important business. So when these things come up, it you know, you have to really sit back and think about, and you know, you got to deal with the situation, but you also have to take into account all the sides. And that's one of the reasons why I'm glad you came in tonight, because it's important for me to hear your point of view and your perspective. And having worked with you over the last few years on the planning board, I know how of an honest person you are, and the straight shooter that you are. And I think that hearing your perspective is good for the board to be able to hear all the sides and understand. I think to everybody else's point, at the end of the day, it's unfortunate, but we have to deal with these situations, and so that when these come up again, that people understand that this is a serious matter and this is important to the town as a whole. So, but for me, it's been a challenging. I've been kind of wrestling with it all week as to what was said and what happened, and trying to understand it from multiple perspectives. So I appreciate you coming in, giving your perspective.
Thank you, Jonathan. Thank you for coming in, Wayne and Mary. I want to respond to this agenda item. I totally and fully support our town manager's update on the chain of lights at our last meeting on December 4th, 2018. Jim was professional, relating his update, putting the major blame for alcohol violations on the Purgatory Brewery of Northbridge. We, the Board of Selectmen, thank the Chain of Lights Committee for the job that they did this year. The subject has been visited by all associated with the Chain of Lights event on December 1st, 2018. The board gives the permission to sign, approve, or disapprove all alcohol permits under Chapter 138 and us, the local licensing authority. In my statement and opinion on December 4th, I recommended no sale of alcohol beverages on the day of the Chain of Lights. I want to reword and clarify that establishments who pour and sell alcohol beverages 365 days each year in Sutton shall continue to serve and pour alcohol on a specific day if they choose to do so, as in the past. Examples are Blackstone, National, Pleasant Valley, the Legion, and others. But I do not recommend any other alcohol permits to be issued for a one-day sale or pouring from carts, stands, or other venues on a specific day. This is the one item that our Board of Selectmen can control under our terms and the terms of Chapter 138. As far as the food vendors are concerned, this is my opinion, and my opinion only, that the Chain of Lights have had local establishments sell baked items and food for the past 25 to 30 years, including the Sutton Lions Club. The Chain of Lights was first started as a family event by Gary Valancourt, Dennis O'Toole, Dave LaValle, and others, promoting a Christmas tree lighting on the Common and eventually having trolleys from Boston to provide free trolley stops throughout town. And this was to promote the goodness of Sutton community and local businesses within town. Outside vendors, such as Chick-fil-A and others, take away from the local churches, the stores, senior center, who count on the sale of their goods, including the Sutton Lions Club, from the first Chain of Lights event started several years ago. This control of food vendors is under the direction of the Chain of Lights Committee in conjunction with the Board of Health permit process. I know that some of you would like different outside food vendors to have a variety of the stops, but again, this takes away local establishments. And for this event, we should support our local town providers as we have for so many years in the past. Thank you.
So there's a couple of things. Punishment. As I understand it, there is no punishment for Whittier Farms other than the shattering of 2 weeks ago's meeting that really hurt a family and a business in town. The fact that I was advised that I didn't need to be here, I think was uncalled for. I understand the one-day permit. I didn't at the time. It's not addressed in your bylaw at a local level. As I said, it's in the Mass General laws if you read it deep enough. I apologize for not doing that. Ms. Mead, the hotline, have you ever waited on it?
On that one, no.
We did. After considerable wait and going through what we had on the internet, we felt as though we made the correct decision. Obviously, we were not correct, and I apologize for that. Mr. Hebert, I respect your opinion. I do not think your opinion should be voiced to a community event that has done so much for this town. I think you should stick to the actual framework of where the jurisdiction lies. Again, thank you for your time. Those are my comments. We will try to do better.
Thank you. Thanks for coming in. Next on the agenda would be the Sutton Webster IMA Nursing Services Renewal. Jim?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is an annual event that we go through. The town of Webster has asked the Sutton Board of Selectmen to vote to continue the IMA with the town of Webster Health Department. Yeah, those of you that have been on the board for some period of time realize this comes up every once in a while. It's typically a result of an audit. An auditor reviews everything and they say you need to revote this. It's the only community that we have an IMA that insists that we revote it on an annual basis. But it's not on an annual basis. It's whenever it comes up. So this time it came up in December, which now we're in the position of voting it from January through June of the following year. So it's a little frustrating, but at the same time, this is the longest IMA that we have. I remember John McAuliffe was the manager, and Cheryl Wawinski and myself had lunch with him talking about this back maybe close to 10 years ago. So in an effort to continue this with the first community that we signed up, I'm recommending that the board vote to continue the IMA from January 2019 through June 2020. Again, we receive $75 per hour of nursing services. That is up. One of the last times that Webster brought it back, we increased the rate. So that's a challenge. Every time that they bring it back, we could increase the rate. It is a great deal for the town of Webster, but it's also a good deal for the town of Sutton. We have made roughly gross $40,000 this year through IMA fees. Of course, that's gross. We net out the nursing services, what we pay Cheryl and other nurses that administer these IMAs. So at the end of the fiscal year, Tim puts roughly $10,000 back into the general fund, and he keeps some existing money in the revolving fund. So it makes a lot of sense for the town, and it's working well with Cheryl. I'm not proposing we increase the number of IMAs because as the board has reflected, it's pretty close to the max, unless something changes. So I'm asking the board to revote this tonight. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Dave?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You just picked up on, I guess, the line of questioning right at the end. We typically talk about this in conjunction with a new IMA. This is really just continuing the level of services that we're currently providing. And, you know, every time we talk about it, we get the same response, that we seem to be okay handling the volume of work that we have, and you know, as you also say, it's a good service that's being provided, so, you know, at the end of, I really don't have a problem. I think it's fine.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You're welcome. Jesse?
Mr. Chairman. Yeah, to Dave's point, obviously the concern is Cheryl, and if Cheryl is capable of doing all the juggling, then how can we not be in favor of this? I mean, after all, at the end of the day, it's net positive, it's not net negative, so as long as she thinks she can keep up with the pace, so long as she's not being drawn away from services we normally provide in Sutton,
Right.
then I see no issue with this.
You know, one of the things we have done is hire another nurse, Grace Pelledu, is that her?
Yes.
Who's working currently with Cheryl side by side and helping out with the IMAs, but also helping out with what the work is done here. And we pay her out of the revolving fund through the IMAs. So it's no cost to the town. It's coming out of the proceeds that we get from the town of these various IMAs. So.
It's an opportunity to expand what we can offer then. Thank you, Jim. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Wendy?
I have nothing to add. Thank you.
Jonathan?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I agree with my other fellow board members, and I think this is something we should continue.
And so do I. And we have a motion on the floor?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion to approve an 18-month extension for nursing services between the town of Webster and the town of Sutton for the period of January 1st, 2019 to June 30th, 2020.
Second.
Motion made, second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0. Next would be the town manager's update.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a few updates prior to Christmas. I don't want to overwhelm the board. The Agera rate increase. This is, in my opinion, very good news for the town of Sutton. Agera has formally withdrawn their request for a rate increase. That's a significant victory that we have had. As the board knows, the Board of Selectmen entered into a 3-year agreement with Agera Energy last fall for $10.97 per kilowatt hour, or there's a different way to put that. I just didn't do that. But that was a very attractive rate. And, you know, when Agera came in and said, a new ownership of Agera, new leadership of this company came in and said, we're going to challenge all of these agreements. Because when we entered into agreement with Agera, as then Chairman Jesse Lemanik knows, we had nothing but positive recommendations from our consultants, Bay State Consultants and Peregrine Energy. They thought this group was terrific, and we could sign a deal with them. Well, little did we know, 6 months later, the company was going to be bought out, and there was going to be a new leadership team in there, and that new leadership team challenged all of it. That was a big mistake because they took on 9 or 10 other communities other than Sutton. And John Shortsleeve from Bay State Consulting is a fine attorney, and he put all of us on a conference call, a number of conference calls, and we developed a plan on how we were going to fight this. And in the end, we prevailed, and that rate will be good for the next 2 years, 2.5 years. So I'd like to thank John Shortsleeve, Paul Gromer from Peregrine Energy. You know, Doreen DeFazio assisted in this. It was a team effort, and it's a good outcome for the town of Sutton. The house fire at 26 Stone Road in Millbury. The town of Sutton Fire and Police responded to a structure fire at 26 Stone Road in Millbury, Mass. Chief Belcedo and Sergeant Nunemacher were the first on the scene. The family was on the front lawn and told both the sergeant and the chief that their son may still be in the house. They told the fire chief where they thought the son was, gave him specific directions to a bedroom and towards the rear of the house. It was a ranch style house. And the chief put on his turnout gear and his self-contained breathing apparatus and went into the fire. I think very heroically and brave. I don't. And unfortunately, the chief was unsuccessful in recovering the body. The individual was found in the living room, not in the bedroom. If the chief was asked to go in the living room, he probably would have gone there first. But it's always a challenge to go into a building filled with smoke, and you've never been in that building before, and have to basically use your hands to figure out what room you're in and go essentially throughout the structure. And that is really a challenge for anybody. Just put on blinders and then, enter a building, and then you realize what the fire department has to go through. So, in the end, I'd just like to thank the fire chief and ultimately Sergeant Nunemacher. They went above and beyond in doing this, and I'd really like to personally thank them, because I think their efforts were heroic and unfortunately not successful, but I'm proud to have them as employees of the town of Sutton. Holiday hours, Town Hall. Town Hall will be open this Friday, December 21st until 12 noon. It will reopen Wednesday, December 26th at 8 a.m. Monday it will be closed. The union contract calls for a half day on Monday, and rather than doing that, I talked to the chairman, and he thought that was a way to give, an early Christmas present to the employees that have been so good to the town of Sutton. On Monday, December 31st, Town Hall will be open until 12 noon, and and obviously closed for New Year's Day, and we'll reopen again on January 2nd. So that's all I have for updates. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So first of all, a GARA rate increase and able to get that reversed is just great news. I mean, it was so much out of the blue and so anti the agreement that we signed. It felt egregious at the time, and I didn't even know at the time they had changed management, and just felt like just a clear violation of what we thought we were signing. So, I'll leave it at that. Why they thought that was a good business decision and where that leaves them next time around, we'll deal with that then. But pardon me. But in the short run, that's really good news. I think the residents of the town that have signed up for this signed up for it for a reason, and so we have returned this to the promise that we had at the beginning. So thank you for that. Your description of Chief Belcito's efforts to enter a home under those, I suspect those of us that don't do this for a living have no idea the kind of peril that our first responders put themselves into without thinking. We had a little brief discussion about this just as we were sitting around the table before the meeting, and somebody said, I think that's what they do. They don't think twice, they just go. That's how they're programmed, and that's what they do. But I think that was a good description of sort of going in blind and having no idea where you're going, and yet doing that because there's a need. We do have a letter that I think we will read into the record after we're done with this section, and it's worth hanging out for. It's really comes from the Millbury Police Department, and it's really well said. So I encourage everyone to listen to that. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As far as the GARA rate goes, Jim, I think you hit the nail on the head. When we were in negotiations, I remember we were a little leery of going with a 3-year.
Right,
I mean, ultimately, the 3-year would have provided us the best rate. But, Peregrine on the other line of the conference call said repeatedly, they're a good company. They have a wonderful reputation, and you will be safe by making that commitment, because I believe we were more inclined to go with a 2-year.
Yeah.
But, you know, knowing the reputation that this company had going into the negotiations is ultimately where we locked in on that 3-year deal. So hearing that, regardless of who is in charge, they are finally willing to uphold their commitment, you know, that's a win. So thank you for the time that you put in. Thank Tim.
Yeah.
Thank Doreen for me, especially because, as I always say, and it's so true, whenever she's involved, go ahead, roll your eyes.
Yeah, yeah.
She's saving us money. So job well done, that's for sure. Yeah, Maddie, what can we say about Chief Belcito? You know, he is, he's my hero. If you don't mind, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to be the one to read the letter into the record when we get to that portion. But I will say this is my view of the chief, and it's something that the chief said, is that he is the type of leader that not only wants to make sure that all of his family, his department, goes in safe, but he's going to lead them in. He's going to be the first one in. He's going to be the last one out. So when we hear these statements, you know, this is Maddie, you know, 100%. So I'm looking forward to the chance to reading it, that's sure. And, you know, we can't forget Sergeant Nunemacher as well, you know, because one of the most brilliant things that we have is the ability to give municipal aid, you know, that whenever there's a need, it's not just our EMS that's going out and responding. They can make calls, and they can bring in apparatus and personnel from other towns.
You know,
So,
if I may, on that whole point, you know, Matt lives very close to this house, so he just got in his truck and got there really quickly. You know, Sergeant Nunemacher was aware that Millbury was short a police officer that night, so he spent a lot of the time on the Millbury-Sutton line just because he had a sense that, you know, if a call comes in for Millbury, I may be the first respondent to that call. So he took care of the north part of Sutton, but he also took care of Millbury as well, so,
it's what they do.
yeah.
You know, on that point, an image goes in my head that I saw on Facebook was that when we had our engine in Worcester covering for the funeral services, you know, we had a crew there all day, I believe.
Yes,
And
day and night.
day and night. I mean, it's part of the bond that the towns have. So while we as municipal leaders, you know, worry about what's going on in Sutton, EMS is committed to the region, the valley, and so forth. So, I love these guys. So it's again, it's going to speak volumes to them. Last but not least, on the town hall hours, I'm sure that it will be posted on the Sutton site, and I'm sure that we have a member of the press that will also be posted in the newspaper so that we don't have any confusion during the holiday season.
You got it.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Jim, thank you for your update.
Sure.
Great news about Agera. My head was spinning. So I appreciate the efforts of everyone in town to sort of stop the spin.
Yeah, thanks.
My heart is just absolutely broken for that family in Millbury and for Worcester with the loss of one of their heroes, and it just speaks volumes. I mean, the letter will certainly encapsulate it very well, but we're surrounded by heroes in this community, and don't anyone forget it, because they're there 24/7, and
Yeah.
we're blessed. And happy holidays to our staff. I hope you enjoy a wonderful long weekend. You certainly deserve it.
Thank you.
So, happy holidays.
Jonathan?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Time for me to go. I want to wish the whole board a very Merry Christmas.
Merry
Merry Christmas,
Christmas.
Mr. Kozik.
Thank you.
Take care.
As far as the AGER rate increase, I'm very appreciative that we were able to solve that. From my perspective, the company trying to go back on an agreement lacks integrity, and it's something we need to keep in mind when we renegotiate in a couple years.
Oh, yeah.
Because to me, that's just a serious violation of trust and entering into agreements, which without contracts, we have nothing. So that's important for me. As far as the fire goes, you know, when I heard, you know, the news and what had happened, my heart goes out to the family, and in no way, like, it just does not surprise me in any way that Sutton was there to help, and that, you know, Chief Belcito and Sergeant Nunemacher were there to do whatever was needed, and it does not surprise me in any way that Chief Balsita would go into that house and do what's needed, and it makes me rest comfortably at night in my house and thinking that if something happens, that
Yeah.
you know, we have incredible dedicated first responders who are willing to put themselves at risk to save us.
Yeah.
So I very much appreciate that. So that's all I have.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jim, for your update. And for those of you that don't know, the rate increase, every bit of that information is on the back of your National Grid bill. It tells what the company is, what the rate is, and one good thing about that, we will, whatever we bid for, will never be higher than National Grid, right, Jim?
Well, every once in a while, the summer rates are lower, but we beat the winter rates every year. And the benefit of this is it provides consistent budgeting. You realize that you're only going to be billed, 10.97 cents per kilowatt hour. So that consistency helps, but I also think we beat National Grid in the winter rates every time.
Any other thing I would just bring up to you or the board, do you think it would be fitting that a letter of what Sergeant Nunemacher and Balsita did, to a letter be put in their files?
Oh, absolutely.
That's a great idea.
I think that, Jim, if you could come up with something
Sure.
from us or from you,
Sure.
I think it's all the same, and a letter in their file is good something for their file.
Well, speaking of the letter, if you don't mind, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to read it now, if
Certainly.
that's all right. All right, to Town Manager Jim Smith, from Sergeant Christopher Poselli on December 5th, 2018. Subject, the house fire on 26 Stone Road. I would like to take this opportunity to thank and commend Fire Chief Matthew Balsito and Police Sergeant Joshua Nunemacher on their mutual aid assistance at a very difficult call this past Saturday night, December 1st, 2018. On this night, a teenage boy succumbed to injuries sustained in a house fire in our town. The unsolicited assistance provided by Chief Balsito and Sergeant Nunemacher is a testament to the type of people you have working for your great town. Chief Balsito, while off duty, was the first to don personal protective equipment and enter the residence in search for the missing boy. And Chief Balsito was one of the last people to leave the scene, stating to me, "I hate losing." And although life-saving efforts were unsuccessful, Chief Balsito's response illustrates all that is good about humanity and makes the town of Sutton a winner to have Matt at the command of the fire department. Sergeant Nunemacher unhesitatingly assisted on the scene, helping search the perimeter of the building prior to entry and even helping to knock out windows and doors. Again, no one asked him to be there. This is a great example of the thin blue line and reiterates the strong interdepartmental relationship between the SPD and the MPD. Furthermore, Sergeant Nunemacher assisted taking one of the residents on a search to look for his brother at a friend's house, eliminating a possible volatile situation once the true gravity of the call was revealed. He worked to keep the older brother calm this entire time while keeping me up to date on his findings. In closing, just know that you have two outstanding people whose selfless acts were observed and certainly appreciated on this night. With utmost respect, Christopher Pacelli, Sergeant, Millbury Police Department.
Thank you, Jesse.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
And next would be announcements, Selectmen's Roundtable, correspondence.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would like to just say thanks to the whole gang at Town Hall for lunch today. It was way more food than any one office could eat. I think there's probably still plenty of remnants around, but it was a good crowd and a lot of fun. And if I could, I'd like to sort of return to the chain of lights and switch the discussion just a little bit. Actually, Wayne had mentioned that we had a meeting with Janet Gerard, who actually chaired the Chain of Lights Committee this year, and with her daughter, and the two of them, I think, ran the whole thing. They were first-time chairpersons for this event. And I think possibly some of my own comments from our meeting were construed a little bit as not putting positive light on the event. And, as I said to Wayne, I think, that night I was really caught up on the alcohol thing and not really thinking about Chain of Lights as a whole. And, that's inappropriate, really. I think the Chain of Lights event is an iconic event in town. And, I've actually worked at Chain of Lights for a number of years. And unfortunately don't really get to travel around and see the whole thing go on. But everyone that I talk to, the experience that you hear, the feedback that you get is that Chain of Lights is an event that people look forward to every year. And it's really just a big part of what happens. It's part of our community spirit every year. I think all the feedback that I've heard is that, this year under Janet's leadership, we increased stops, we increased volunteers, we increased participation in the event. Certainly we had great weather and that was helpful. But look, I think all of this stuff that's gone on, every attempt was made and continues to be made every year to try to improve the event and try to bring more people out and try to bring more stops and more people involved in the event. And so I want to make sure that the message is clear. We appreciate the Whittiers for all the effort that they put into their event. We appreciate all of the stops for the hard work. It isn't easy to prepare your own individual stop if you have one, and certainly it isn't easy to run the event as a whole. And I don't think, I know I didn't mean it. I don't think anybody here meant to denigrate the efforts that these people have put into this. So again, I just wanted the opportunity to make sure I said that publicly. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I got a couple of things really brief. First and foremost, from the Dudley Genron family, last weekend, I think it was last weekend, we had our annual boot drive, and those funds go from our family to yours, which was one of our charitable accounts at this time of year to help out families in need of a little love and support at Christmas time. And I'd like to proudly say that once again, we raised our goal of just about $2,000. So thank you to everyone who came through. It was nice. Santa was in town with us, giving out candy canes to the kiddos. So thank you to everyone who came through. And of course, the Dud's always looking forward to next year with that. Speaking of Santa, rumor has it that Santa has made his way from Manchog, which was at the beginning of the month. Then he made his way through the center, and then he was at parts down near the Northbridge border. And this coming weekend, he's going to be down in Wilkes. So for all the kiddos who are on the nice list this year, pay attention. Rumor has it that, again, the fire department is doing their part. So when you hear those sirens blaring, get outside and give Santa a big wave, because I'm sure he'll appreciate it. Plus, that way he knows where you are and do that double check that you're on the nice list. Last but not least, we had the food pantry supplies. Food-wise, the food pantry is doing very well. Thank you to everyone in the community for their tremendous generosity and support of the food pantry. This is the time of year that everyone, is digging a little deeper in their pocket and thinking about being charitable. So, they're pretty well stocked food-wise. But again, they're always in need of supplies. So add deodorants, soaps, laundry and hand soaps, shampoo, tissues, laundry detergent, paper towels, toilet paper, razors, things like that to the list when you make your donations. And I'm sure Michelle and company down at the Mike Chizzy Food Pantry would be appreciative. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Wendy?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just one item on behalf of the Police Building Committee. Just a few short days ago, we had the 1-year anniversary of the groundbreaking. And now, as anyone driving by can see, we are in the twilight stages of completing the building. Tremendously happy myself. So please join us or tune in on Wednesday, January 2nd for our monthly meeting and get a building update. And, as we've stated, our police department and certainly other municipal departments are certainly to be honored with this new building, and they deserve it greatly. And frankly, I'm happy it's almost done, so. And just happy holidays and Merry Christmas and Happy New Year to everyone in town. I hope it treats you and your family well.
Thank you.
That's all.
Jonathan?
I don't really have any announcements, but I would just like to wish everybody a Merry Christmas and Happy New Year, and look forward to working with you again next year.
Okay, thank you, and I do the same. And Merry Christmas to everybody. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, may I make a motion to adjourn?
Yes, sir.
I'd like to make a motion to adjourn then.
You're on the good list, and I will second that.
Oh, I appreciate that.
Motion been made and second, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye, motion passes 5-0. Thank you.